Hello. So today I'm real excited to show you a tutorial on how to use sports betting information, what people think or who people think are going to win March Madness, and use that to create a March Madness bracket of your own. In the tutorial, I'll walk through scraping data from a website. I'll show you a little bit about Kaggle, a great place to learn data science and practice building models. And then lastly, we'll go over actually creating a bracket using some bracket generation software. Then you can use it to make your own bracket. Anyways, let's begin. First up, there's a few libraries here. Request, that's one to do HTTP request. When I go hit a website like this one, behind the scenes, there's HTTP going on to refresh all that data. That's how you do that in Python. Request. Then there's Beautiful Soup. That's a good library for parsing HTML data that you get back in that HTTP request. And yeah. So anyways, let me just show you the website we're starting with. Here's one I found, Vegas Insider. I live in Vegas, so it seemed to be a good idea. And they have data from all these different sports books. And then they sort of have this average score here, the consensus, Vegas Insider consensus. That would be a good starting point on creating like a power ranking on teams. Who is most favored to win? Who should you pick to win your bracket? In this case, Gonzaga is favored to win it all. Arizona is a distant second there, and then it gets a little bit muddier as you keep going down. But anyways, we're gonna try to scrape that and then create a bracket. First up, it's requesting the HTML. Please do my imports. We get this big text before I have a big googly goog that's not fun to look at. If you want to see quickly did the HTML load properly, you can just display it in Jupyter Notebooks like so. And you can see, okay, the table looks all to be there. It's kind of a mess to read, but it's good just to quickly show you, hey, everything looks like it's there without having to search a bunch of isolated things. I'm going to refresh the page because our CSS got messed up. That's what styles the page. So just refreshing here. I got to do a full refresh. Glad I'm showing you this now just so it doesn't happen to you. I need to unload that HTML and then refresh the page. It'll disappear that style sheet. Okay. Got the data. I've verified that the data all looks to be there. That's sort of the first two steps in scraping. Lots of times websites will try to hide things. And here I'm not going to go too deep on how I did everything. Just essentially, when you run into issues, right-click and do inspect. This is an inspect element if you haven't heard of it. And it's a great way to find out what code generated what thing you're seeing. So say I want to figure out, how would I find out that Gonzaga has a 306 here? I can just sort of zoom in here with this graphical view and slowly piece my way through it. Back here, I found this BC Futures tag that had a lot of good information. That was sort of the first starting point of what I was trying to scrape. And then here I get all the column names. Won't go through the exact implementation, but I did find something involving links to figure out what this picture was for. Because it's a picture of BetMGM, it doesn't necessarily say BetMGM since it's all a picture, but I found there's a link that I was able to parse to get the actual bookie's name. That's the column names. Similar thing I did with the team names. And then values. Values was a little bit harder. I wasn't able to get them separated by commas or columns, but I was able to get a whole big long list of things, which I can match up. So I'll show you that in a second. One thing just to note, when you're doing scraping, it's good to be pretty verbose about your errors. In this case, I just did a print statement, could do a log or raise an exception even, but whenever you're parsing things, it's good to sort of catch your errors. Don't always do the happy path of code. In this case, I want to make sure float works, so that would fail if that didn't work. Very specific with these two cases. So, this would generate failures. It wouldn't have a hidden failure that would mess up my data and cause me some issues. So always try to think about doing things that when they break, they tell you that they break. That's why I have this print out here. It would have had a couple prints above this if something was unforeseen. Nice. Here we go. That's all the odds. Then I found that the length of the odds that I found, like I said before, I didn't have columns separate. I wasn't able to parse that very easily. But if I take the odds and the number of team names, that should equal the number of columns if I parsed everything in the table. And sure enough, that is true. Good sanity check. So we can keep moving forward without too much fear. Here we just create the table. You can see we have the team name, the consensus score, BetMGM, etc., etc. That's basically it from a scraping standpoint. Now from here, you could go in by hand, one by one, enter these values in, but we're going to use the Kaggle dataset so we can potentially merge on that for other features, should you want to do that in the future. And then it's nicer to work with that with bracket generation software because the person who made it, I believe they specifically made it for Kaggle. So we need to get things in Kaggle's format. Here we go. So Kaggle. And every year there's a March Madness contest. There's also a women's one, which I would also strongly recommend because less people do it, less interest there, but it still a contest, still can learn quite a bit, and yeah, it's sort of exciting to have two brackets going on. Anyways, we're just gonna look at the data here, and I've sort of put the notes in the notebook, but essentially we just need a few files for the stage 2. Stage 2 is like the actual submission. Stage 1 was more of like a testing part of the contest, if you will. Okay, so here's the files you need. Put these in the data folder. I've already done it for this year, but say you're coming back from the future, you want to try this tutorial out, then you know how to do it. Here we go. We've got our teams. Kaggle has a team ID, some information about the season. Don't worry about match. That's something I put in there to help me match things up. And we need to match up this team name with our team names from earlier. That's our. Also, one extra cell here on creating matchups. Kaggle has a specific format they want where the two teams that could potentially play each other are all in this big table, and you have a prediction for them. So you need to have the first team be a lower number than the second team and all combinations there. So there's 2278 possible games that could happen depending on, if a 16 seed from one bracket or one side of the bracket comes to a 1 seed, and there's quite a lot of combinations of games in it that could be played. And yeah. So for matching things up, we could try to write it automated, but there's a lot of edge cases. There's only like 64 teams, maybe 68, depending on what you want to count. So I just did it by hand. It's not too bad. It took me about 10 minutes. Up to you on that sort of decision in the future, but when it's small enough, trying to automate everything is problematic and could lead to some hidden issues, so I try to be more explicit about things. Okay. Here I'm just sorting things. It's easier to do things when it's sorted. I'm generating this sort of unfilled in lookup table that I'll then fill in manually below. Generate that. Here I just copied it over, and then I manually matched up all these IDs. The good thing is I believe Kaggle IDs stay the same each year, so hopefully won't have to do this too much except for some other teams in the future. And yeah, this is a look at all the teams that didn't match. I didn't have Rutgers, Seton Hall, St. Peter's, or Wyoming. I did see Wyoming lost, so that's probably why they aren't in there. But overall, these teams aren't too good. I just went through later to I looked at another data source to fill in those values. But just a few things wrong, but at least we know. Here you go. Here's a look at the team name and IDs with the scores. You can see Gonzaga's number 1, and we also have the team ID. So that's the big piece we needed to do the bracketeer step, which is creating a bracket. Now that we have everything merged, we can do our predictions. So I'm just calling the rank of the team the consensus score. In sports betting, the lower the score, in American events, the lower the payout on the odds, sort of the score. So 306 is worse odds as a better than Arizona at 612. And in that case, Gonzaga's favored because the people running the bets don't want to lose money, so they try to price things roughly fair. Okay, so in this case, we can just do whichever team has a lower score, and that will always work in deciding who should win a game. It's a crude way of estimating that. Here was me just filling the blank. I went to this other site called Covers to get betting odds. You could also use this site to find things. Just view it sort of replaceable compared to Vegas Insider. Just I did Vegas Insider already for you, so up to you. Anyways, here we go. We got the ranks. I just load in the rankings by doing the lookup table here. And then we have our predictions. So my prediction is just, is the team's rank lower than the other team's rank? If so, say they win. If there's a tie, it always goes to the higher numbered team. You could handle that a little bit better if you want, but as a crude first step in generating a bracket, this is pretty good, I would say. Better to focus our efforts elsewhere. And here's for Kaggle, the format they want. It would be, I'll show you in a second actually, but just do this here, matchups. Yeah, that's the format they want for every given matchup with that sort of ordering of team IDs, generate the preds like so. Yeah, we are ready to generate our bracket. And it's pretty simple. You just need to have the Kaggle files. That's why we did all that extra work to get this. And just run that. And I will show you the bracket. Okay, so here's our bracket. It's not the prettiest. It doesn't have all the logos in there, but it does work. I've used it for a few years. It's pretty nice. It's very helpful in trying to enter things on your own. One thing to notice, there are probabilities everywhere. I mentioned that earlier. I just sort of had them hard-coded 0 or 1 based on who was going to win. But in the Kaggle competition, you're predicting a probability of a given matchup being a win-loss. That makes it a little bit more fair if one team goes on a crazy streak. Also, it's a little bit more realistic because in basketball, you can't say 1,000% who is going to win what game. That would be kind of crazy and get you like Adam Sandler and Uncut Gems. But we that's why they do probabilities. In this case, we just have 1 or 0. That's where things a little bit crazier. Also, a few things to know here. Just look for upsets. Is the seed a 2 beating a 1? There's one right here with Kentucky beating Baylor. That was one thing that sort of surprised me because I don't know anything about college basketball, even though I had a top 1% bracket before. The thing there appears to be injuries for Baylor, and Kentucky was sort of stronger to start the season in some people's minds. I don't know quite what's going on, but that's something. Hey, if you really think Baylor should win, you might want to look into why the betting markets are not saying that. Also, another good one is Illinois losing to Houston. Illinois has been kind of, it's my alma mater. I like them, but they haven't really been able to show up when the games really mattered or been consistent enough. They also did quite poorly in the Big Ten tournament. So that could be a reason why they're losing to Houston. And I hope this bracket really helps you create your own brackets. One thing to think about with betting is always what happens when you win. Great example of that is one time I had a bracket in the top 1%. It was because I picked Virginia to win. And if you know anything about Virginia, they lost in the first round one year after they were sort of favored to win everything. So people are a little bit sad about that, didn't think they would do very well, but my model kept saying, hey, they're the strongest team. So that's the type of risk that if you do a little bit of background digging and it checks out, that's a great one to go for because so many people are against it. Say you want Illinois to win, you think they're actually much better than people say here. That could be a pretty sort of differentiating pick if you truly believe in it. So don't let the payouts too much guide your decisions, but maybe put a closer look in different spots where everyone is thinking one way, but you feel a different way about it. This is a pretty good baseband bracket if you just wanted to enter this too in your contest. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Good luck on your brackets. Let me know if you have any issues. I only got about a day before this year, but I hope you find this valuable and you can use it for other sporting events. Golf is another great one to do stuff like this too. Thanks.